They won't say it to your face, but the world thinks you're done, that if you did not make it by 30, you probably never will. They call it realism, but it's quiet condemnation. And the worst part, you started to believe it. You watch people younger than you rise, go viral, get rich, get seen, and somewhere deep inside, you wonder if you have missed your moment entirely. You do not say it out loud, but it echoes every time you open Instagram, every time someone asks, "So, what are you up to these days?" There is a kind of shame that does not scream. It just lives inside you, a soft voice that says, "I should have figured it out by now." But what if I told you? You are not late. You were just lied to. What if you have spent the last decade not failing, but forging? Because the truth no one tells you is this: the fire that burns hottest takes the longest to ignite. Early success looks shiny, but it's often hollow. You have been busy learning what no book can teach: resilience, depth, pattern recognition, silence. The world worships youth because it's loud, but it's the late bloomers who change everything, quietly, deliberately, permanently. You are not behind, you are becoming. Because after 40, you stop chasing praise, and you start building legacy. And maybe, just maybe, this delay was protection. You were not meant to rise when your ego was still fragile. You were meant to rise when your roots were deep. The world measures you by clocks, but clocks do not measure awareness. So, if you have ever looked in the mirror and felt that burning question, why does it feel like something inside me is still waiting? This video is your answer, because now it's time, not to catch up, but to arrive. There is a lie so common, so quietly reinforced, that most people never notice when they have accepted it. It does not shout, it whispers, and it sounds like this: you should have figured it out by now. You are too old to start over. That ship has sailed. You hear it in family dinners, in casual conversations, in the way someone says, "He is still chasing that," as if ambition had an expiration date. No one ever says it directly, but it is written everywhere, in Hollywood, in job applications, in the tech industry's obsession with 20-year-old billionaires. The message is simple: if you have not succeeded by 30, you are already late. And if you are over 40 and still evolving, still dreaming, still trying, the world does not see that as strength. It sees it as failure dressed in delusion. But let's pause. Who taught us that life peaks in our youth? Who decided that your best ideas, your sharpest insights, and your most impactful years had to happen before the age when your brain even fully matures? It's fiction, sold as fact, and we bought it because we were young. And when you are young, you believe speed equals success. You believe hype means greatness. You believe the spotlight must be earned fast, or it won't be earned at all. And so, we sprinted, not to build something real, but to catch up with everyone else's timeline. That sprint was not success. It was fear. Fear of being left behind. Fear of being the only one still unsure, still invisible, still building. But here's the truth that burns through the lie. You did not fail. You were misled. The real danger was not in moving slowly. It was in thinking that speed was the measure of worth. And that belief did not start with you. It was programmed into you, one repetition at a time. Napoleon Hill called this the law of cosmic habit force, the idea that any thought, if repeated long enough, becomes internal law. It becomes your autopilot, the voice in your head saying, "It's too late." That's not your intuition. That's not realism. That's residue, leftover programming installed by a culture that confuses youth with value. But let's look closer. What does youth actually bring? Energy, yes. Confidence, maybe. But also inexperience, fragile identity, external dependence. The truth is, most early success is built on shaky ground, a fragile self-worth tied to praise, a hustle that's more performance than purpose. The people who win fast often flame out faster because they built for applause, not for meaning. And yet, here you are, maybe slower, maybe doubting, but still here, still asking, is it really over? Or is there still something in me worth building? The answer is yes. But to get there, you have to destroy the timeline you were handed. You have to realize you are not running late. You are just no longer following someone else's schedule. And that is freedom. Because once you reject the lie, you reclaim the truth. that some of the most powerful lives do not begin at 20. They begin at 47, or 58, or 63, not in a dorm room, but in a quiet evening when you finally say, "I'm not done yet. In fact, I'm just getting started." And from that moment on, everything changes. So, let's destroy the lie fully. If youth was the peak, then why do so many people crash right after reaching it? Because when your success comes before your identity, you end up building a life that doesn't actually belong to you. You perform, you please, you run fast, but you don't know where you're going. And when the applause fades, so do you. That's not power, that's performance anxiety on a pedestal. But late bloomers, they've already tasted silence. They've already survived invisibility. They don't build for attention. They build for depth. The world doesn't recognize late bloomers because their power is quiet at first. But when you look closely, they carry something others don't. Pattern recognition. After 40, you start seeing what's real. You've made enough mistakes to connect the dots faster. You've learned how to read people, read situations, read energy. Resilience. Youth breaks when, rejected. You've been rejected before and still came back. That's not a weakness, that's calloused courage. Less ego, more clarity. You no longer need to prove, you just want to build. Your clarity doesn't come from ambition, it comes from refinement. Carl Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming your true self. And here's the part nobody tells you. Individuation rarely happens in your 20s, because in your 20s, you're still wearing masks handed to you by society. It's only in the second half of life, when the mask starts to crack, that your real self begins to emerge. When youth burns out, awareness ignites. And from that fire, something terrifying and sacred is born. Authenticity. Success without suffering creates arrogance. Success after failure creates humility. One builds entitlement. The other builds endurance. Immature success is obsessed with being seen. Earned wisdom is obsessed with substance. And in a world drowning in surface-level success, the person who moves in silence, but builds something real, that person becomes unshakable. Colonel Sanders was 65 when he founded KFC. He had failed in business, law, sales, even as a gas station operator. But when most would have resigned, he started over. Not with energy, but with vision. Vera Wang didn't design her first dress until she was 40. She had been a skater, a journalist, an editor. Only after exploring multiple lives did she find her real one. Today, she's a global icon. Lesson. They didn't bloom late, they bloomed after they were ready. You remember Antonio, the plumber who was fired at 48. In the competitor's version, he just reprograms his mind and becomes successful. But in reality, here's what really happened. Antonio had been everyone's backup plan for years. Always available, always polite, always overlooked. He wasn't fired because he was old. He was fired because he was forgettable. Until one morning, after weeks of depression, he looked in the mirror and whispered a new question. If I wasn't scared, how would I present myself today? That day, he stopped calling himself a plumber. He rebranded as a leak prevention strategist, not fixing problems, but preventing them. He raised his prices, changed his appearance, started publishing short tips on water damage online. At first, no one noticed, but 6 months later, his inbox was full. Today, Antonio runs a team, but more importantly, he runs his story. He's not who he was before. He's not bitter, not loud, not flashy. He's calm, sharp, unapologetically late. And that's what makes him dangerous. Because the world expects the loud ones, the young ones, the fast ones. They never expect the man who was silent, and then decided to rise. So here's what you must remember. The late bloomer is not behind. He's forging depth the world doesn't see, until it's too powerful to ignore. And when he finally moves, he doesn't sprint, he walks. And every step he takes shakes the ground beneath him. Real transformation doesn't happen when the world is watching. It happens in silence, when there's no applause, no recognition, no feedback loop. It's invisible. But it's the most powerful shift you'll ever make, because the war you're fighting now isn't out there. It's in here. Your mind isn't your enemy, but it obeys your worst voice unless you train it otherwise. Most people think the struggle is external, money, time, opportunity. But the real enemy? The daily script you repeat without noticing. I'm too old for that. That's not realistic anymore. Maybe if I'd started sooner, they sound harmless, they sound mature, but they're weapons. And they're aimed at your own potential. Every word you say to yourself becomes a command. And your subconscious doesn't question commands. It doesn't care about age. It doesn't evaluate the truth. It just listens and obeys. That's why so many people live the same year 40 times and call it a life. Because the programming hasn't changed. Napoleon Hill, in Think and Grow Rich, introduced one of the most powerful and misunderstood ideas in personal growth, autosuggestion. He wrote, "Any idea, plan, or purpose may be placed in the mind through repetition of thought." Translation: if you feed your mind the same message enough times, it accepts it as law. Most people have been practicing autosuggestion their entire life, but not with affirmations, with self-sabotage. They've rehearsed their limitations so often that they've turned them into a personality. I'm just not good with money. I've always struggled with confidence. I'm not a risk taker. Number, you just practice that identity longer than you practice the one you actually want. At first, your new thoughts will feel fake. They're supposed to. You'll say, "I am ready, I am wise, I am capable." And a voice will respond, "Yeah, right." But here's the truth. Feeling fake is the first sign you're saying something new. It's not delusion, it's unfamiliarity. You're not lying, you're leading, you're not pretending, you're rehearsing. Every powerful identity begins with practice. Every powerful belief begins with resistance. Old script, "I'm too late. No one will take me seriously. There's no time left." New script, "I'm not late. I'm precisely on time. My scars are experience. My delays are depth. I'm not behind. I'm prepared." You don't need to believe it fully at first. You just need to say it daily, deliberately, even if your voice shakes, because eventually, the old self gets tired, it stops arguing, and that's when the new self starts to take over. The old you won't die dramatically. There won't be fireworks. No one will throw a party. It'll happen slowly, quietly, one decision at a time. One morning where you get up even though you feel defeated. One no to the old comfort. One yes to the unfamiliar discomfort that feels like growth. And then one day, without realizing it, you'll notice the silence inside you sounds different. It doesn't mock you anymore. It mirrors you. It doesn't pull you back. It prepares you forward. That's when you'll know the shift has begun. Not because the world changed, but because you stopped obeying the version of yourself that never believed in you. And from there, there's no going back. You can't evolve surrounded by decay. That's not a metaphor, it's a law. You can read all the books, reprogram your self-talk, visualize your rebirth every morning. But if you go back to a room full of voices that speak in limitation, fear, and resignation, you will sink. Not because you're weak, but because environment always wins over willpower. Toxic environments rarely look toxic. They look like comfort, like old friends, like familiar routines. You laugh together. But listen carefully to what's being said. At our age, you can't expect that anymore. It's too risky to start something now. Be realistic. These aren't opinions, they're viruses, spoken softly enough that you don't notice, until they've taken root in your identity. You don't become toxic overnight. You absorb it, one quiet phrase at a time. Now, let's be clear. You don't need to cut everyone off. You don't need to go live in the woods. But you do need to become a gatekeeper, not of your time, of your energy. Because the conversations you tolerate become the code your subconscious runs on. You think you're being polite by sitting through another rant about how life is over after 40. You're not being polite. You're being programmed. And there's a difference between setting emotional boundaries and suppressing your emotions. Boundaries say, "I still care about you, but I can't afford your influence right now." Suppression says nothing. It just sits in silence, absorbing the poison with a smile. You're not meant to carry other people's decay, especially when you're finally beginning to clean your own. Napoleon Hill didn't sugarcoat it. You become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, not just financially, mentally, energetically, spiritually. If you surround yourself with people who speak limitation, you will think in limitation. If your closest relationships are built on regret and nostalgia, your mindset will be built on decay. Your subconscious is listening, not just to you, but to everyone around you. And every repetition you hear is a seed. If you're not careful, you'll wake up one day in a garden of beliefs you never chose, but inherited. Imagine a single drop of water, harmless, software, unthreatening. Now imagine that drop falling on the same spot of stone, every day, every hour, for years. What happens? It carves it, not with violence, but with repetition. That's what your environment is doing to you. Not all at once, not with drama, but slowly, drop by drop. It's shaping your identity. You think you're thinking for yourself, but really, you're echoing everything you've tolerated. If you want to change your life, you have to change what you allow. That means distancing from people you love, but who quietly sabotage you, saying no to conversations that reinforce failure, walking away from nostalgia, heavy groups that glorify who you used to be, ending calls that always end in, "You should be grateful for what you have." You're not ungrateful, you're becoming, and becoming requires purification. It's not cruel, it's survival. You don't need to justify your growth, you just need to protect it. Because this time, you're not rebuilding to be accepted, you're rebuilding to become unrecognizable. It doesn't feel like an enemy, not at first. It feels soft, warm, familiar. Nostalgia wears the mask of comfort, but underneath, it hides a brutal truth. It keeps you tied to a version of yourself that no longer exists. And even worse, that version was never fully real. You look at old photos, you replay old songs, you tell stories that begin with, "back when I..." But here's what no one says out loud. You don't miss the past. You miss a version of yourself who still believed, who still had the courage to try without shame, who didn't know what failure felt like, who got up fast without the weight of, "I should have known better." But was that version of you actually better? Or just more naive? Was that time really golden? Or are you just too frustrated now to admit that the present still holds potential? There's a version of yourself you imagined, the one who succeeded by 28, who had it all figured out, who didn't lose momentum or direction, and now, in your 40s or 50s, you look back and think, "I was supposed to be farther by now." But here's the truth. That version never existed. He was a mirage, based on other people's timelines. You didn't fail. You outgrew the story you were given. And now, it's time to release that ghost. Because as long as you cling to what you could have been, you'll sabotage what you're still capable of becoming. Carl Jung called it the death of the persona, the mask we wear to fit in, to be praised, to survive early life. And the painful part? That mask worked. It got you here. But it won't get you to where you're going. True growth requires grief, not just for the time you lost, but for the person you were and can no longer afford to be. Letting go of him isn't betrayal. It's reinvention. It's easy to worship who you were. It's harder to surrender to who you're becoming. But ask yourself honestly, is that past version helping you build? Or is it quietly destroying your ability to evolve? Because if what you were doesn't help you build, then it's destroying you. And sometimes the bravest thing you can say is, "Thank you for getting me this far, but I'm not that person anymore." Then close the photo album, stop playing the old playlist, and walk forward, even if you don't yet know who you're walking into. Because the future doesn't belong to who you were. It belongs to the one who's willing to rise without reference. There's a moment in every real transformation that almost no one talks about. It's not dramatic. It's not inspiring. It doesn't look good on camera, but it's where everything changes. It's the moment when you've let go of who you used to be, but haven't yet become who you're meant to be. It's the void, the identity limbo, the season of invisibility. No titles, no certainty, no applause. You're no longer fueled by old dreams. But the new ones aren't clear yet. You're no longer accepted by the old crowd. But you haven't found your people yet either. This is the part where most give up, not because they're weak, but because they think being undefined means being lost. But that's not true. You're not lost. You're being rewritten. And rewriting takes silence, stillness, unrecognizability. Think of a seed buried underground. No light, no fanfare, no validation. But beneath the surface, everything is changing. Roots are forming, structure is taking shape. A new identity is being built where no one can see it. That's what this season is, a quiet rebellion, a sacred reconstruction. It's not glamorous, but it's powerful. Because when you do finally re-emerge, you don't come back improved, you come back transformed. But here's where it gets dangerous. Even in this silence, you'll be tempted to look sideways, to scroll, to watch, to compare your uncertainty to someone else's highlight reel. You'll see the young ones rising fast, the old friends who figured it out, the people who seem certain, clear, and miles ahead. And you'll start to wonder, what's wrong with me? Why is it taking me so long? But remember this, they're not ahead, they're just loud. And loud doesn't mean deep, loud doesn't mean wise, loud doesn't mean lasting. If you study history, you'll see a pattern. The ones who changed everything disappeared first. They went silent. They were forgotten. They were mocked. They were misunderstood. Then they returned, different, clear, untouchable. They didn't come back as versions of who they were. They came back unrecognizable, and so will you. But only if you endure the silence, only if you survive the part of your story that has no applause. So, if you're in this space right now, this confusing, quiet, lonely middle, don't rush it, don't escape it, don't numb it, because this isn't a breakdown. It's a remodel, and the you that's emerging, he won't need to announce himself. He'll walk into rooms that once ignored him and change the entire temperature without saying a word. The world is moving fast, but it's not going deeper. We're drowning in noise, content everywhere, opinions from everyone, success measured by followers, not by foundation. It's a world obsessed with speed, but starving for substance. Everyone's building, but no one's asking, build what and why? And that's exactly why the world needs late bloomers, not just to succeed, but to recalibrate the culture. Late bloomers don't move for validation, they move for vision. They've already experienced failure. They've already walked through silence. They're not afraid of discomfort. They're not shaken by setbacks, because they've lived through worse. Their fire doesn't scream, it simmers. It's not a flame of ambition, it's the quiet burn of conviction. And conviction builds what noise never can, things that last. We're entering an era where charisma isn't enough, where style without substance collapses quickly, where speed without structure becomes a trap. What the world is starting to crave is wisdom, not just ideas, insight, not just motivation, maturity. And that's the domain of the late bloomer, because wisdom isn't taught, it's earned through silence, reflection, reinvention, and resistance. Late bloomers are not competing anymore, they're guiding. They don't raise their voice to be heard. They lower the volume in the room, because when they speak, people listen. The truth is, early success is often about proving yourself. Late blooming is about offering yourself. That shift only happens when ego no longer runs the show. And that's where real legacy begins. Because late bloomers don't care if they're trending. They care if they're timeless. They don't want to be viral. They want to be remembered. And that's what makes them dangerous. Because they're not seeking praise. They're answering a calling. So, here's what you need to know. You're not late. You're refined. You're not old. You're initiated. The fire that took longer to light burns hotter, burns wiser, burns longer. And the world, this chaotic, overstimulated, distracted world, needs that fire more than ever. Not to make noise, but to build what's next. And you're not here to catch up. You're here to redefine the standard. It won't happen in front of an audience. There will be no spotlight, no applause, no one clapping when you finally start to change. That's how you know it's real. Because rebirth doesn't begin when people notice. It begins the moment you decide, not decide to try, or to dabble, or to wish, but to rebuild, brick by brick, belief by belief, day by day, in silence. And yes, it will be lonely. Not because you're forgotten, but because no one recognizes who you're becoming yet. That's how real transformation works. First, it feels like disappearance. Then, emergence. You'll get no trophies for healing, no viral moment for doing the inner work. But that's the price of becoming something deeper. Not decorated, but defined. Because here's what you must understand. Time is not your enemy. Comfort is. Comfort keeps you looping. Comfort keeps you apologizing. Comfort keeps you chasing a life built by other people's rules. But coherence? That's different. Coherence is when the inside finally matches the outside. When you stop faking strength because you've forged it. When you no longer talk about who you're going to be because you're already walking it. So if you're quiet right now, if you're off the radar, if no one sees the work you're doing, good. Stay there. Let the silence be your strategy. Let the doubts build pressure. Let the inner work reshape you. Because when you return, come back so transformed that not even you recognize who you were before. Your story doesn't end in obscurity. It begins there. That's the secret they don't tell you. But now, you know. And that means your return won't be noticed. It'll be unavoidable.